What's going on, everyone? It's Elias here at the Rainy Forge, and if you haven't guessed already, based off of that little cold open or the title to this video, we're making a knife out of this pickaxe. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, I have made pickaxe knives before in the past, and they always turn out awesome. But today, I wanted to do something a little bit more cool and make a Scottish Dirk out of one of the picks of this pickaxe. The next step here is I'm going to use the cross on my hammer to go ahead and whack the steel down. I'm going to flatten it out as best we can, get to about 1/4 of an inch or thinner for this blade. So as you can see, I've got the tang forged out, and I'm just going to kind of flatten everything out. And we want to make sure that tang is nice in the center of the blade, which it's looking like it is. So before we set it back in the forge to cool down, I'm going to heat it back up and just punch in my maker's mark right at the top. Alright, so here is our Dirk out of the forge. And as you can see, it's completely covered in forge scale, which is normal. And so what we want to do is we want to hit that real quick on the wire wheel, clean as much of that off as we can so it doesn't wear down our grinder belts. So there is our blade with our bevel ground in. I've also got that nice false back edge going. So the next thing that I have to do with this blade is to grind in our little shelf for our guard piece. So there's our little shelves. And the next step is to do our brass guard piece. And so we want our slot in this guard to be right in the center because we need to use this full amount of brass for our top guard. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take my blade, put it on top of the piece of brass, get my black Sharpie, and just kind of line it up where I want that guard to sit. And then I'm going to make a little mark on either side of the tang, and that's going to give me our width. And then for our thickness, I'm just going to look at my my milling bits and pick the right one for our thickness. But more importantly, we've got the length. So now I'm just going to scribe a line for that length. And then I'm going to use my ruler to find our center point. And it looks like this is 1 inch. So we're just going to make a little mark where our center is. And as you can see, my line is a little bit to the left of where we want to be, which is fine. I'll just correct that. But with our center point here, I am going to take an old nail set that I have here for doing my pinholes and just give it a nice little tap. And that will just give me a good anchor point for my first mill bit, because what I like to do with my mill is drill all the way through and then bring the level up and then mill side to side. And that way I just get everything to stay nice in line. Even though I have a halfway decent mill, it tends to move side to side. I'm not really able to do great precision work. So this just helps mitigate that feature a little bit. Primer hole mill. So we really only need to take a little bit of material off the top to get this to slide nice on our tang. So I've got my flat file, and hopefully it fits. Just enough room. So we're just going to work this a bit. Let's see if that's enough. Little bit more, and that should slide right on there. I can always grind some material off the tang here as well if needed to make this slide on there, but I'm just going to do a little bit more file work and we should be able to get there. So I did end up grinding the tang down a little bit, but now I can slide this guard on just about to the top. Still nice and snug right at the top, which is fine. We're going to tap it on all the way later so it stays where it's going. But that's all we need to do with that for right now. The next step that we got to do is put some gimping on the spine, and then we'll take the knife out for heat treatment. So we'll clamp her back up. And then I'm going to grab my, call it a wedge file. and we'll start doing the jimping. So there's our triangle pattern, and now I just got to go and do the whole thing. We're going to go down maybe about 5 inches, 4 or 5 inches, somewhere in there. So there is our jimping. And now we just got to go ahead and do the heat treatment. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do that off camera just to save some time here. If you guys want to see me quench some blades, go ahead and check out any other of my videos. I do that in most of them. But in this case, I just want this to be nice and quick, and I want to really focus on our handle work and then making a scabbard. So, without further ado, so I've got this blade up to 400 grit on my belt sander, and the next step is to rub it down with some 400 grit sandpaper. Then we're going to go at 800 grit and then finish with 1000 grit. Go over to our buffing wheel and polish it up. So first things first, I'm going to put a little bit of mineral oil on the blade, and that will just help my sandpaper and help all that grit to clear out so I get a nice even sand. Alright, well, I've actually gone ahead and made a second guard for this knife. I've done this one out of aluminum, and as you can see, we have a really nice contrast between the brass and aluminum, but I just really wanted that top guard to be a little bit thicker, have a little bit more of an accent to it, and then I've got a nice piece of aluminum for the back as well, once we get to that point. But so the next step that we got to do is we got to work on the handle for this Dirk. And so I have gone ahead and cut out with paper some little handle pieces here. And this is just kind of the traditional Scottish Dirk handle shape. Looks like the handle of like a Roman gladius or something. And so that is what we're going with. And I have got those scribed out on this piece of live edge cherry here. So we're just going to have to hop over to the bandsaw and cut those out real quick. And then we are also going to be putting this in the center of the handle as our nice little accent piece. This is some burl wood set in resin with Kydex backers. I always save little bits of handle material as I'm cutting out handles, just in case, and I can always use them. And so that's what this is. This is from another knife, and I just have this little bit of scrap, which is actually the perfect size to
slide right into the center of our handle here and look really, really pretty. So like I said, hop over the bandsaw and we'll cut everything out. So here is our handle material. I've gone ahead and just sanded everything down, made everything look nice and even. So the next thing is we'll put everything together here. And then I'm just going to grab some 5-minute epoxy, throw a bunch of that on here, clamp everything nice and tight, and we're going to wait about half an hour, and then we can keep working on the handle. So while we're waiting for the handle scales to dry for our knife, we are going to go ahead and start working on the sheath, which in this case is going to be a scabbard. Now I have actually never made a scabbard before, but I watched a bunch of tutorials on YouTube on how to make knife scabbards, and it seems pretty simple and straightforward, and in the line of what I've been doing already with making wood sleeves for all of my kitchen knives. So pretty straightforward. We're going to take a piece of poplar here, and I'm going to lay my Dirk right on top, right about in the center here, and just press it down with my thumb. And then I'm going to trace out the outline of this Dirk. So there's that. You can kind of see that pencil mark on there. So that is the area that we are going to end up milling out over on my end mill. And we're going to do this twice. So we're going to have one chunk, and then we're going to copy that over and do the other chunk. And it's going to be 2 halves of the sandwich that go together. And then the centers will be milled out for our blade to slide through. I will actually grab one of my kitchen knife sleeves right now and show you guys what that kind of looks like. And so here is one of my Petty Chef knives, and as you can see, it has this nice wood sleeve with it. And so this is basically what we're making here. I've got 2 halves with the center milled out for the blade, and then our edges are going to be beveled. Now I'm going to end up beveling this scabbard a lot more than my normal little wood sleeves here, because we really want to kind of just copy that blade shape on the final product. So back to where we were, I have my silhouette scribed out on here, and now I'm just going to follow that on either side and give me a little bit of room so I don't blow through the side with my end mill. You can always take material away. It's a lot harder to add material. And I'm just going to kind of give a rough scribe here what we're doing. There, so that's kind of what we're looking for. Just copying that blade shape on the outside a little bit bigger so we can give ourselves some room. And so now we just got to go over to the bandsaw and cut just our red line here. And then we're going to take and transfer that onto the remainder of my board here and make a second one. And then we'll mill out the interiors. So I have my two scabbard halves all milled out, and we just put them together, slide that knife in there, make sure everything is good. And it feels good. I got a nice tight fit right at the top, but not too tight, so it'll sit in there and lock in there nicely, and then it just draws nice and smooth. So the next thing I'm going to do is just clean these up, make sure everything is nice and flat and flush when I glue them together. Throw some wood glue on there, clamp everything together, and then we're just going to let that sit for a couple hours. So I have my scabbard here, all dried, and what we're going to do next is we want to kind of get to this shape on the inside. We want to take away as much material as we can without getting too super thin on the edges, and just kind of start to shape it into that nice rounded blade shape. Now I could take this over to my grinder and start working it on the grinder, but I'm going to save a little bit of time and a little bit of lifespan of my grinder belts and use this old draw knife that I have, and we're just going to start doing the corners here. Alright, so here is our sleeve, and I have actually gone ahead and put a coat of clear polyurethane on here. Reason being, when we go to stretch leather around the sleeve here, there will be a lot of moisture, because we'll have to wet that leather down to make it malleable to stretch around here nice. So, because of that, if we did not coat this with a clear poly, all of that moisture in the leather would transfer into the wood, and you'd have some warping and moving, and it might even make its way all the way through the blade, which would cause your blade to rust, which is never good. So it's very important, just do a nice clear coat of poly. Now the next step, I have these two little strips here, and these leather strips are going to get wrapped around just like so, with a little bit of glue. And then I'm going to clamp them down nice and tight until they dry. And these, once they get covered with leather, the whole thing, there'll be nice little raised edges where our belt in the center can kind of have a place to grab and not slide up and down. So that is the point of those. And I have also put holes in the ends of these. So there's your two holes right there, and the same thing on the other side. And that is so once I glue it and wrap it around like that, I can take a needle and thread and really pull everything, cinch everything nice and tight down on our wood sleeve. So that is the plan. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then once that's done, we'll talk a little bit about finishing this off. So now that everything is dry here, we'll move on to our leather. And so I have here a paper template for what we're looking at. And the general idea is our leather will wrap around just like so. And then everything will get stitched up nice and tight. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out of leather. And then we'll start doing some tooling. So we're going to do the tooling now, and I've gone ahead and wet down my leather so I get a better stamp. And right now we're going to be using this Celtic braid stamp, and I'm just going to go all the way down both sides just to give it a nice little tooling here. So there we have it. There's our braiding all the way down. Now I'm going to do a little bit more tooling, but I'm going to get back with you guys, and I'm going to talk about doing our holes for our stitching. So I've done a little bit more tooling, and I prepped our edges here. So as you can see, I have my nice little pattern going all the way along so I can evenly space my holes. And now I'm just going to take a hole punch that I have, and starting with the first little dot that I have here, I'm just going to put 2 holes, and then just evenly space the tool for the next 2. And rinse and repeat all the way along to the bottom. And then I want to just make sure I'm keeping track of how many holes I'm putting in, because I'm going to have to do the exact same thing on this side, and we want everything to match up nice and even all the way down. In fact, if you really feel like it, you can fold this, wet it down further, but fold it in the center all the way and just glue up the side, and then you can punch in all of your holes at once to make sure everything is nice and even. The only problem with that is it will give you a bit of a fold line all the way down the center here, and I don't want that. I think that looks terrible, so I'm just going to take a little bit of extra time as I go and just count my holes and just try and keep things as lined up as possible. Alright, so I've gone ahead and I've dyed my leather a nice burgundy with a black border. And I've already wet this down once and started form fitting it around my wood. But I pulled it off and let it dry because I want to start my stitching and get about halfway up before I shove the wood in here. And then I will stitch it the rest of the way, cinching everything down. I will have to wet this down again. Don't be afraid to wet it down. That's why we put a clear poly on the wood. You can wet your leather down as much as you need as you go until you get it stitched all the way up nice and tight. Now, doing stitching, we are doing a, I guess you call it a cross stitch on this. We're making little X's all the way up. Now, when you're doing that, it is very important that you take your leather and you find the entire length of your stitching. Take your string, and then you want to do that length 6 times. And after you have done that 6 times, you can cut your string, and you'll know that you have enough to get all the way to the end and then have a little bit left over for tying a knot, and you're not fighting yourself on being like super close to your stitching. Very important you do that. The worst thing you can do is get 3/4 of the way up and realize you don't have enough string and have to start all over. That always sucks. So rule of thumb is usually 1/6 of your lengths if you're doing a cross stitch. So I made it about 3/4 of the way up here, and I've got my wood sleeve shoved in there, and I'm just going to push it in nice and tight. Make sure the top is as flush as I can get with the leather. Just a really nice tight fit here. And that looks like that's going to be about as close as I can get it. And that's fine. I've gone ahead and polished the top so it looks nice and pretty. And so now I'm just going to continue with my leather work, cinch everything nice and tight. And then I've got a little tool here that are leather bands that go across here. We want to really see those, so I've got a little tool here to kind of press this leather down and really shape and form to really get those to show. I'm going to work on that mostly after I get all of my leather work done here, because I want this cinched up nice and tight while I'm working it, but just to show you guys so you get kind of the general idea of what I'm trying to do here. So there you go, there is the scabbard. I think I'm going to make a little black tip piece for down here, make it look really nice. And then I think I'm going to buy some leather and just make the belt piece that goes here, that comes out, that you can attach to your regular belt so you can wear it. That's what I'm doing there. This will also get polished up once it's dry. But there's that. So here is our handle all glued up and dry, and as you've noticed I have this back piece separate. That's because I want to shape this separate before I attach it, and we're just going to drill a hole through this for the back of our tang and then our little pommel nut and our end cap. But with this, what we want to do now is we're going to scribe a line down the center and then cut it in half on the bandsaw and mill out the center just like we did for the scabbard, but for the tang of our Dirk. And that will look really, really nice. I'm hoping that it didn't get too thin here in the handle. It's looking a little thin, but instead of going through and redoing it, I'm just going to finish shaping this, and if we get to the end and I don't like it, I can always make a new one and change it, but for now I've got more than enough material to work with, so we're going to work with it. So we got my handle pieces here. I went ahead and shaped this little butt cap, and then did my guard in the front and whatnot. So basically now we're just going to take some epoxy, slide everything on like so, and then I just got to figure out what I'm doing for my little end cap here. But other than that, she's pretty much good to go. So we just got to put an edge on her, glue up the handle, and finish her up.
Thank you for watching till the end of the video. If you liked everything you saw, well, why don't you go ahead and hit that big like button down below, and also hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. It really helps the channel to grow, helps me to get some more videos to you guys out faster, and helps me to put out what you want to see. As always, links in the description below to all of my social media, as well as where you can buy one of my awesome knives, including the Scottish Dirk that you just saw me forge. And, well, you know the deal. Until next time, keep on keeping on.